right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Inevitable Podcast. In this episode, I have the pleasure and the honor of being here with Iona Szkurnik, and hopefully I didn't butcher your last name. Hopefully that was the correct pronunciation. We appreciate you joining us today, Iona. And for those that don't know, Iona is the founder and the CEO of Education Jorney. They're an education platform that offers a multitude of educational solutions for companies and their employees, helping them become lifelong learners. They've raised a seed round with a few friends of mine, so the folks at Norte, Holic, and Latitude. And also, Iona is the co-founder and board member of Brazil at Silicon Valley, which was the genesis of how we connected. And they're basically a movement that is co-led by students, Brazilian students at Stanford and Berkeley, and it's frankly a must-go event that connects the Silicon Valley with Brazil. I've had the opportunity to attend both editions, the ones that happen offline, and it was a fantastic event. I congratulate you for all the work that you've done there, and it's a pleasure to have you here and talk a little bit more about you, your life, and your journey. So thank you again, Iona, for joining us, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, Pedro. I'm honored with your invitation.
It's our pleasure. So I'd love to just get just start from the actual beginning. So how was your childhood? So you grew up in Rio, right?
Yeah. That's quite an unusual question. I'm the fourth child of four siblings, of course, that were born in 6 years. So we were very close to each other. I have 6 years of difference of my oldest brother, and we are four. That means that we were all the time together, and my house was pretty much a movie kind of house. Like we were loud all the time. We were doing stuff all the time. Somebody was going to the soccer game, and somebody was going to the ballet, and and we were together going to school, and we were together going to swimming, and that I think that's to say that my childhood was very fun and busy, and I had to learn how to be heard. And I think that that's a skill that I absolutely give my family experience and my upbringing the reason why I think that I'm used to being with leaders, if you will, and like all my brothers, my siblings are strong personality wise people. My mom and dad, my dad is very strong in his personality. My mom is very caring, and so she was always there for us, and she was the kind of mother that absolutely thought and made us believe that we could do anything we wanted. So
That's very important.
It's very important, and I give a lot of value to my upbringing, and I think that we are still very close. It's very funny when I go to Rio. That's in Rio, and when I go to Rio, my husband jokes that we don't need to set up a time and place to meet. We just meet. We go to the padaria and we meet. We go to walk in the sidewalk and we meet. And I think that that's to say that we are very aligned. And
Oh, nice. So your entire family lives in the same block or neighborhood to this date?
No, actually, that's funny. Everybody is scattered around the world. I live in California for 10 years. My brother, just before me, lives in Europe for 17 years now, 16, 17 years. He went to London Business School and basically never came back. And my parents moved to Portugal 5 years ago. My sister, after leaving Rio to Sao Paulo, went to Panama. And I have one brother in Rio, but that's to say that we are not there all the time. And when we are there, we are meeting all the time. And it's just very fun to be together. I think that all of us are married, all of us have kids. And it's absolutely impossible to find a restaurant that fits all of us, and to, even to fit in a photo is it's a challenge.
That's
But
great.
that gives me a lot of perspective in respecting people's personality and how people are different, and not judging, and the complementary skills of people and teams. I think that we are a team.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I also think that just like it was not my case, for instance, but the upbringing of a traditional family structure is very important for individual self-reliance, which is always a trait that, at least when we are partnering with founders, we look for. Because you got to believe in yourself and fundamentally believe that the impossible is possible daily. Otherwise, it's really difficult to achieve the expectations that come with raising venture capital.
I never thought about that. But I think that the fact that we were like, my mother had to make her day productive. So we were going to the same school. It was a Jewish private school in Rio. And I think that my school is also very important to who I am today. It's a great school that gives students, still today, a lot of freedom. It the values of my school is to absolutely let people be whoever they want to be, and free thinking. And I think that the going even before my family, my grandparents, they came after the war to Brazil, the four of them. And the four of them had to learn how to survive, not only during the war, but in a new country, with a new language, in a new profession. And those people founded the school that I went to. And this school has fundamental values of freedom, freedom of thinking, freedom of becoming whoever you want to be, because the most important thing is to be healthy and happy and have a means to an end. And so there's a lack of judgment. You don't have to be something. It's not like a prep school that you have to go to finance, or you have to X, Y, and Z things. And a lot of my peers and my siblings' peers went to do amazing things in the world through very non-conventional paths. So at one point, you're going to ask me how I became, CEO of Education Journey and one of the founders of BFV. And I cannot tell you in a straight line, because it was not intentional. I think that, what I learned is to follow my gut, and not to be something to follow somebody else's expectations. And I think that that's a recipe for doing something amazing in life. Just be who you are, and I think that things start to unfold in front of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's beautiful, and it ultimately is a lot of what we, when our whole ethos as a firm at Atman is to partner with inevitable people. And I think that one of the key traits of folks that are inevitable is that they're fearless about their authenticity. So you just and that's probably the fastest way for self-actualization, because then when you're unapologetic without being rude, right? But you're just unafraid of who you are, then you get to become who you're supposed to be, and it's not an obvious straight line, like you said, in many ways. So that's really cool. I was actually looking at your LinkedIn, and I wasn't able to find. Did you go to college, and if so, what did you study? Because I wasn't able to find it there, and I was just curious about your major, or if you went to college.
There's a reason why there's not there. It's and I think that after talking to everybody who can listen to this podcast, I will go and edit it, because I'm not proud of what I studied.
Oh, well, but why?
And it's very silly. I'm going to change it for sure, because it's silly not to be proud of my journey. I did psychology.
Yeah, that's great.
I know.
That's
I
very
mean,
important.
nowadays I think it's great, but when I was struggling to create my career, I thought that didn't serve me. It didn't serve me for anything to be a psychologist. I think here in the US, we have a culture of valuing anything you do in your major. You can have whatever major and minor, and then follow whatever career path you want to. I mean, absolutely. I have a close friend that I was just thinking about her because she was my K through 12 friend. She did a major in biology, and she did a PhD at UCLA in linguistics. And she went to work for Google in 2000, I don't know, 11, coding the search engine at Google. And she majored in biology. And she went to do a PhD in linguistics. And she's at Google till today. She actually went to the BSV. She lives here. So in the US, you have this freedom of understanding that whatever you do as your kind of liberal arts for, kind of first years of understanding the world and who you are, it's valuable, whatever it is. In Brazil, you must agree with me that you kind of sentence the person based on where the person went and what the person did.
Oh, absolutely.
And
I left Brazil precisely
psychology doesn't mean anything,
because of that.
right?
I think psychology means a lot. Like the Jungian Red Book was a transformational book in my life. Kierkegaard, Adler, like all these folks, just it really helps because at least in venture we're paid to have an opinion and paid for our judgment. And the earlier that you invest, the more important psychology is. So, I think but it's also valuable when you're reading people in a room trying to close an enterprise deal. I think that just it's a helpful degree in many ways.
But you must agree with me that it's very unorthodox to have.
Yeah, but I'm
fallacy.
comfortable being with the. I used to be a journalist, so I also have a very unorthodox path, and so it's kind of like and frankly, that's one of the ethos, for instance, behind how Sequoia invests, that they don't invest in normal people. And I subscribe to that reality because for the most part, normal individuals, that they will follow that obvious path, will rarely build very large transformational companies because it's not normal to want to follow that path. Of course, it's a biased view. And you have, a lot of other folks that have followed the consultant banking MBA path and I've invested in many of them as well. So there isn't a right answer, but it's just the what I've learned, and this is the main reason why in my early journey as an immigrant, I used to say that I left Brazil because they need to know who they're speaking with before they will build trust. Whereas in the US, specifically in the Bay Area, right? Like I trust you until you prove me otherwise.
Yes.
And then we co-build the relationship, right? So that is a fundamental difference that's ultimately what brought me to the US. So it's interesting.
Yeah. But I am very proud of being a psychologist.
You should be. It's great.
And I think it helps me, Pedro. Honestly, I think that it helps me exactly because I think that I was trained to be aligned with myself, and every time I distance myself to what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, my vision, I usually do wrong choices. So it did serve me to become who I am, but also I think that I have a I don't want to sound here too much full of myself, but I think I've developed an empathetic way of relating myself to other people, as I was saying, not judging, and I think that this is one of the reasons why Brazil at Silicon Valley maybe is the success that it is that we gather different kinds of people and we embrace, everybody with a very empathetic mindset of everybody has a talent, and let's bring different people together and see what's going to happen. So anyway, it's part of who I am.
That's great. And then were you ever a clinical psychologist with patients and so forth? Like, did you? Yeah.
Yes, okay, I was for many years. And that's the beginning of my connection with education. I chose to be clinical psychologist for kids with learning disability. So I started working. My first job was in a school. My first job in psychology, not my first job to make money. I really started working when I was 16, just like seasonal Christmas job to make some money. But with psychology, I worked in a school, and I used to have the kids that quote unquote are the problematic ones, are the difficult ones. And then so the teachers sent to the psychologist with the full angriness, like, go to see the psychologist, get out of my classroom. And so the kid came, and I used to say, what happened? And then kids used to say, I don't know, she just sent me here. She screamed and she said to me, get out of my room, blah blah blah. And so I loved the fact that it was a safe space for the kids, and that we could connect with outside the performance of being a student or being a friend or being a son. It was just this little kid and me, like, what do you want to talk about and stuff. But I did have to run some tests when there was something else than misbehavior. And what I understood from this first year of having contact with goes on in the minds of people is that there's a direct correlation of the emotional situation at home and the ability to learn at school. And so kids, they act out at school when there's something going on inside their hearts and their minds. So I wanted to learn about learning disability, but I ended up facing family. It's called sistêmico, terapia sistêmica, systemic therapy. It's something that is from German scholars called Gestalt. It's a line of understanding how we work as a system. So we are systems. So there's Pedro interviewing Iona here. There's Pedro as a VC broadly. There's Pedro, son, friend, boyfriend, all this. Those are systems that run within each other, the Venn diagram, if you will. I got so much passionate about it that I went to do a master's. As soon as I finished my graduate studies, I went to do a master's at the Federal University of Rio, only to study family therapy and systemic therapy. And I absolutely loved it. And with that, I continued seeing patients in my private clinic that was basically teenagers and kids.
Got it.
And so I was always close to the education system of my patient, because
because of this fundamental connection. I understand that. I'm definitely was one of the kids that was sent to you. It was. I remember the techniques though. It was quite interesting. They'll ask you a question and they go, draw something. The kid has like no filter, so you just draw explicitly that problem that might be happening at home. It's very interesting. This connection that you're making, and so, but from there you went to start doing public policy, right? And actually you work for the government. Right. How was that transition? There
was 5 years in between, my psychology years and my public policy years. So in these 5 years, a lot of things changed in me. One of them was I faced the reality of me being unable to change my patients' realities. Because if you're working with kids and teenagers, you have to work with the families. And if the families are not willing to work with you, you're going to change the patient, but the patient is not going to be able to thrive and to go on with their lives because they are trapped in the family system. So I was getting frustrated and I was getting my heart broken again and again and again. Oftentimes when I empowered the patient, the family didn't want to continue therapy. And there was all these consequences of doing a good job with the patient. And so at one point I faced like, okay, I don't think I can continue doing this.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
difficult
other
because the
reason,
results don't depend. They just don't depend on prescriptive advice from you. Like, the patients have to be willing to do the work.
and it's just so crazy. What is success when you're having a child or a teenager in therapy? Is it to empower the person, or is it to make it more compliance with the family, dynamic and routine? Do you want the person to have a voice, or to just be quiet and not make any like problem becoming even bigger?
It's hard because ultimately, you want to find alignment, right, maybe between the parents and but this doesn't depend on you. It's like a triad. It's very complex.
Exactly.
You need to
Very complex, very complex. But the other reason, there was a reality check over there at that point. I got married very young, and we got pregnant, and I was unable to continue working with other kids, growing a kid of my own inside of me. That was too much of a emotional burden. And I understood that I had to step away from my kids in the consultorio, in my office, in order for me to raise my kids inside of me. And that was on top of me having a reality check of going to make ends meet. I needed to become independent, and honestly, I was working. That to say, Pedro, that I was only working with low income kids. 100% of my patients were low income kids from the slums of Rio, from favelas. I worked in social clinics, and I was just very passionate about, in giving them a safe space. Those kids were more attractive to me than the upscale kids that were like having some sort of problems that I thought that was less important than the problems that the kids in the low income communities were having. So I chose to work with Rocinha kids because I felt the urgency of being there for them. And I did that very passionately for 5 years until I was like 26. And I married when I was 25, and I just needed to become more independent. So, and I was more mature by then. And it was like, okay, I'm going to survive by air. I can't. So I went to do an MBA to transition. Very, very classic move. I was like, okay, MBA is going to be my savior.
This is
And
in
it kind of
Brazil.
was. This was in Brazil because I couldn't leave. My husband was finishing up a very long entrepreneurial journey, and leaving Brazil was not in the question at that moment. And so that's what I had. That's what I could. I was by then very used to dealing with reality, Pedro. There's some stuff you can dream of, and you can aspire, and you can push yourself to pursue getting out of your comfort zone and questioning the reality. But you have to juggle with what are the tools that you have in hand? What can you do right now to become who you want to become? So my only choice was to do an MBA in Rio, and I did. And I was very focused on, I need to transition. I need to have a job. I have a son coming in, and I needed to find a job that I could support myself. And then I just bumped into an opportunity to join the public policy, and I thought it was the wrong move. I was not excited about doing that, but at that point I was 26. I didn't have anything to offer to McKinsey of the world, McKinsey, Bain, consultant. I didn't have any skills that they valued. I wasn't going to banking out of the blue. So I didn't have a lot of options. And I think this is very important for people to listen, because sometimes done is better than perfect. I did not I could not choose what I wanted to do. It was what, I had in front of me, and I took it. So I went to public policy thinking like, this is the wrong place for me. And my then boss, he convinced me to accept the offer when he did the offer to me, because he said, we need exactly somebody like you that have empathy, that will know how to have people collaborating with your ideas and know how to deal with different kinds of people and egos, and just being smart and having critical thinking, because I had to deal with so many problems in my 5 years as a psychologist.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what was the specific work when you were working for the State of Rio?
So I was hired to take care of strategic projects, and it was purposely broad as strategic projects because it was basically anything that was related to two things. One, improving people's lives, so social development and economic development. And and I was on the cabinet of the governor. So I had relationship with all kinds of secretarias, all kinds of offices. For example, Olympic Games. One of my first projects was the Olympic Games. And that's a very strategic project because it would bring a lot of investment and will change, a lot of the social and the economic outcomes of where the development was going to take place. So the World Cup was also a strategic project. So it was very fun. It was very fun. I loved my job. I was right away embracing, a different world, and I had to learn so much, and I was very happy. I jumped out of my bed to go to work.
Oh, that's great.
And it was very exciting. And I think that it was the moment when Rio was taking off based on the cover of The Economist. I was there for 5 years, and it was the best 5 years of Rio in the last maybe 30 years. And I loved my teammates, and I loved our goals, and it was a happy time.
That's great. Yeah. I think you're the first person that I have met that, because as you probably know, I'm very anti-government, and it's just by the virtue of my experience dealing with it. Nothing really gets done, and you don't really have the correct incentives to be excellent. Everything's very temporary because how politics work, right? It's just really hard. The first 2 years you're at the job, you are learning how it works, and then you have 2 more years to get reelected. So suddenly the incentives, democracy is the best thing we have so far, but it needs quite a lot of fine tuning, in my opinion. And it kind of reverberates across the board, but we have to have something.
I completely agree. I so much agree that that's the reason why I left.
I see.
Absolutely. If you ask me, why did I leave then? Oh, it was so good. I left because it got expired, as you're saying. It was just 4 years of doing stuff. The 5th year was, okay, game. We won the game. We got reelected. And so everything changed. The incentives changed. And I realized that was not my place.
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, for me, my experiences I've spoken a few times in the Brazilian Senate and the members, and in Congress, but I've also, we're members of NVCA, the National Venture Capital Association. That's ultimately our interest group in DC. Lobby happens everywhere. It just happens that in the U.S. it's legalized, right? I fundamentally believe that the United States is as corrupt as Brazil. It's just that the difference is that you have systems for corruption, meaning, premium processing for immigration. What is that? It's an organized bribe, because it makes no sense to process something 2 weeks because you pay more. You should just have an efficient system for everyone versus putting an economical burden on top of it. But and I'm a very capitalist-like person, but. My point is, like, every time that I just think it's wrong. It's like if you pay more, you get it more in situations in which you're involving the government. And It was very interesting. I remember the first time I went to a meeting with a member of Congress in DC, and you're faced with that vibe of real power. And this was during the tax reform that Trump was doing, and we had all sorts of concerns regarding making sure that carried interest loopholes and all the tax advantageous things that we have for long-term capital gains in the asset class were going to perpetuate. And I was the most junior VC there, learning a lot from the others, and it was just it was so interesting because in the briefing meeting that we've had to prep for the meeting, we had like 30 different options of how the conversation might go, and we were all ready with specific talking points. It was a 20-minute meeting, and basically you have to explain why that's important. Talk about job creation, the fact that 2/3 of all Americans that have access to healthcare they have it from a company that has raised venture at some point in their lifetime and so forth. So, but at the end of the day, we do all these meetings. It takes like probably 6 months to schedule them. We all fly out there, and it's just so slow. And all the buildings as well in DC, they're all destroyed. I mean, we pay so much in taxes, and like the buildings are so poorly taken care of, except for the SEC. SEC is actually super nice.
But I think that this feeling of the building being old. We renovated some of the most important buildings in Rio when we were there. And we got a lot of criticism because we were spending money on renovating buildings. So anyway, just to say that I think it's very hard to come with an agreement, come in peace with the government. But that's exactly the reason why I left, Pedro.
I see. And why did you guys decide to come to California? Because you've been living in Menlo Park for what, almost 7 years now?
More. 9 years.
9 years.
9
okay,
years.
Great.
So the reason, a lot of things happened, like 3 things happened. One is that we won the election, the second term, and everything changed. The air changed, the color changed, and I realized I was alone. Like, where's everybody? Everybody just got their personal agenda checked, and they were doing something else. And so I was like, I felt like I shouldn't haven't been there for all these years. But then I got my angry, and I was like, okay, what can I do with that? And so I thought about scaling more than already my population of 22 million people in Rio. One of the things that I like the most is that we were having a lot of impact because we were talking about a government level, as you're saying. It is real power. And if you use this power to the good, it's just like very rewarding because you see things getting shipped and impacting people's lives for real. And so I really like that feeling for the first time. And if you think about who I was 5 years before, like talking with kids at Rocinha, scaling was not something that was in my mind. I was really on a macro level, micro level, then I was in a state level, and then I thought, okay, so now I really want to go global. And to go global, the US is the obvious choice. Like, it's where you come here and you really learn the tools to make an impact in a much, much, much broader scale. And so that was one of the reasons why the US. The other thing that happened was, as I was saying, my husband finished his entrepreneurial venture that he was at the time. So now we were free to really get a white canvas and see, like, what do we want to do? And we were like, okay, so where we want to go? We had 2 babies at the time, 2 kids, 2 boys. And we wanted to give them and the third thing is that we wanted to give them a more safe childhood upbringing. By the time, Rio was becoming even worse than it was. I think that it's as bad as it is now. It's very dangerous. I'm sorry to say. I love Rio from the bottom of my heart, but it is dangerous. And we had a family event that involved a death.
I'm sorry about that.
And it was like life-changing. It was the moment when we realized, like, we're getting out of here. We are, and we're not coming back. So the reason why we're not back, it's because we had something very, very close with a fire gun, saidinha de banco,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
that that I wanted so fiercely to protect my kids and to give them, you know, just peace of mind of being free and biking everywhere. Anyway, so when we
Oh,
started to
it's
look like,
important. Freedom has a cost, unfortunately, but it's very important.
yeah,
My mom has been kidnapped twice, and
really,
yes, and then but the lightning kidnaps. I guess it's funny when I explain that to Americans that we have there's a fast version of it as well, when they just grab you for a few
it's a
hours
joke, right?
and withdraw the maximum ATM. I mean, right
Yeah.
now I know several people that you have two different cell phones, and you have one where you actually have your fintech apps installed, and the one that you don't. So when you're out on the street, if you happen to be robbed, you have your Plan B phone for for because they'll at gunpoint will ask you to unlock your phone, and your entire life is there, right?
We are very creative. We are very
it's
resilient, right? We know, we
it's
learn how
crazy.
to deal. It's crazy. It's crazy. We have to applaud our resilience and creativity because it's a harsh reality. It's a harsh reality. And and I got very mad at with with my life. I was working in the government, being paid ridiculously low and trying to improve people's lives again, like I was doing. There's a similarity. I was trying to improve kids' lives when I was working basically for free at the slums. And then I went to work in the government, also not getting any money at all, trying to improve people's lives. And then my grandfather was shot from after, at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday in the city center of downtown Rio, just being the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to leave Brazil and not come back. And so my husband and I, we focused on coming to the US with a red carpet, meaning we want to come here with our brains and our hands to work, and we want to add value to the society here, but we want to come by the front door. And my mother taught me that you go places by the front door, never by the side door. And so we just brainstormed, Pedro. Honestly, we just talked to a lot of people, and how can we do that? How can we immigrate? And joining a university's that graduate school is a way.
Yeah,
And
it's the same
and
thing I did. That's always usually what I tell people: is just like come as a student, because it
as a
gives you the
student,
excuse to spend time with people and work for free until you build your reputation and figure
yeah,
out the next step.
yeah. You
That's
have to
the
be willing to give us a few steps behind because you're gonna leave whatever you've built before coming here.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, the life of an immigrant is a life of sacrifices. Just like how
Absolutely.
our grandparents escaped the war to Brazil. The good news is that it's not jumping on a ship, not knowing what you're going to do, with
Yeah.
the inability
Yeah.
of like here you have Amazon Prime, so
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
sacrifices they still exist, but that fundamentally we live far better lives than previous generations.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was how we ended up in California. It was very intentionally leaving Brazil, not going back to Brazil, and giving, my blood to start a career here. And and the reason why California was based on luck, I think that we cannot forget that we all have an element of luck. And I applied to a bunch of places and I got lucky to be accepted at Stanford. I'm very grateful.
Got it. Oh, that's wonderful. And then once you're at Stanford, right? Like, so you're also helping. You're part of the first team that was actually developing their online learning program. You had a company that was helping people that didn't speak English learn how to write code in Python. So it's just be interesting just to learn more about like how were the first years as you were navigating the Stanford ecosystem
Sure.
as an immigrant and entrepreneur.
Yeah. So because I think I was a very unorthodox graduate student again, because I was already married with kids and 10 years of experience in my career. And and so I talked to my advisor, and the first opportunity I had, I said, I want to work. I want to work here. I want to do what is there to do. I don't want to be just studying, because something else, Pedro, about the government and the reason why I left is that I have a sense of urgency. And I think that in the government, you mentioned that it takes a long time for things to happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, there's no incentive. The only sense of urgency is getting reelected and raising money for the
yeah,
next campaign. That's it.
yeah,
Everything
it's
else
just
can.
like, how can you schedule a meeting for 6 months, like from now? Like, what? 6 days seems too long. And so when I came here, I unleashed all my sense of urgency that I had to put on hold. First of all, because I applied, I studied for 6 months to apply. It was a very hard job, one of the hardest jobs I had to apply, because to me it was a means for me to, quote unquote, save my family. I had this motivation of bringing my kids here, so I really focused on being accepted in the best schools. And so when I came, I was so thirsty of working and being with a team, with people, and learning. And I knew that I wasn't going to come back. So I wanted to take advantage of all the opportunities I had at Stanford to me outside the classroom. And I was very lucky that they were building the first team of the online learning platform at Stanford back in 2013. It was called the Vice Provost Office for Online Learning. And I love that opportunity. I love the entrepreneurial venture that we were, the 12 people that we were together building. And with that, for another class, I built this PortPy. It's a portable Python, or Portuguese Python. That was something that we wanted to teach computational thinking for non-English speakers, because there is a barrier of access to non-English speakers when you think about computational thinking. Everything you teach in a native language, but when you teach the coding commands, it's in English. So imagine everybody in Thailand, in Indonesia, of course in Brazil, in Peru, in Chile, every country in Africa being taught Python, but then when they go do the commands, they have to write print, they have to write loop. And my co-founder and I, we changed the nucleus of Python, which is an open source platform, and we launched it, and it was amazing. But it was a nonprofit organization. There I go with my karma of not making money. So it was a nonprofit organization again, you know, and it was a success. I loved it. It was something that we did with all our hearts, and it was great. We deployed it successfully, but it was a nonprofit organization, and I didn't want to go after grants. I just left the government, that everybody was asking for grants for some way. I didn't want to start asking for grants. It was just not something that it was aligned with my sense of urgency. So then I followed the path of working in the very, very sexy world of startups and entrepreneurial. I didn't even know about entrepreneurial world and startups and everything that we can do with our free thinking and our innovation mindset. So I guess that Stanford to me was a deconstructing and reconstructing experience. I absolutely came in as one person and left as a different person.
Got it. And then you worked for Hapara after, and which was a Chicago-based educational company, right?
They were actually a New Zealand company.
New Zealand.
They started in New Zealand, but then they came to the US because they were awarded as the global Google partner for helping adoption and retaining Google Apps for Education. And so it's a SaaS B2B company for Google. It's a service that Google doesn't provide. And I think that I became very close to Google universe when I was working with PortPy. And so to me, it was a logic transition to help them scale their business, which was then being launched globally, the Google Apps for Education. And we were the team that helped adopt Chromebooks at schools. And it was also a very, very exciting times. I loved being the first person that was doing the international development of the SaaS, of the software.
I see. That's great. And then, what was the path from there to actually starting your own company, and deciding, hey, I'd want to be a founder?
So I stayed 4 years in serving companies here in the Valley, like Hapara and others. And I was always very close to the C-level, as international expansion. Like, I was the person seen as the non-American of the team, which was good. It was an asset. And I think because of my psychology training, I just saw how the leadership team behaved. And I was thinking, like, what would I do if I were in the C-level? And what would I do if I was a CEO in all these situations, when I was going back home after work? But I didn't have a aha moment, like, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to solve. I was not trained to become an entrepreneur. It was not something that I brought up looking at, like, today, So I was thinking, I am going to just help a good problem, a good solution to solve a big problem, and I'm just going to follow the team. But with COVID, everything stopped, and I think all of us stopped running the wheel like a little rat, little mouse, when you're running the wheel all the time and just, like, delivering your objectives and thinking about the next strategic project and stuff. And when I stopped, in 2-3 months, Pedro, it just came out of me. I was like, that's obvious what I need to do. It was very, very clear to me. It was just time. I just needed the opportunity to stop living in an automated fashion. I don't know.
No, it makes total sense. I really like Alan Watts as well, and he also has the whole thing when it's silent, right? Like, it speaks, right? Ultimately, an exercise that I typically do every 3 months or so is that I isolate myself in nature for 2 to 3 days, and I fast, and I don't use any outside stimuli, and then that's where I get my best ideas. And I try to do it every quarter. It's very important because there's a whole theory on, like, how does that whole thing work from a vibrational frequency standpoint, but it's just I fundamentally believe that the first slowdown of the pandemic got a lot of people to just ask themselves what's important and why am I here, right?
Absolutely. And one of the S's that Stanford usually asks is, what really matters to you and why? And I put so much effort, so many years ago, to write an authentic, to your point, an authentic essay that, oftentimes this question comes back to me. What really matters the most to me and why? And then Education Journey idea came to place, which is, we live in a world that content, it's such a commodity. There's so many great content. We are now producing content. There's free content. There's all kinds of niche-oriented content, and people still struggle with education. They still struggle with finding their best selves and developing their talents and becoming who they want to be and all that. So what's the problem? How can we really impact people's journey? And I just started drawing down. I think that curation is very important. I think that we have to be very efficient in helping people what they are looking for and how they're finding it.
And for those that don't know, what exactly do you guys do? Just if they're listening.
So Education Journey is a corporate education company that helps the workforce to develop their skills, which means oftentimes upskilling and reskilling.
What does that mean exactly?
That means I answered to you already with our business model because we are B2B. Okay, so I'm only partner with companies, and I'm focusing on the adult education, the lifelong learning. So the more technology we have, the wider the skills gap people are facing in their daily jobs. All this conversation about the robots is taking our jobs and so many things are automating what we do. That's part of the equation. AI is really transforming the landscape of everybody's jobs. And what we need to do, Pedro, is help people upskill and reskill what they do. Whatever you do, you can upskill or reskill, which means transitioning or knowing how to do better what you do.
I see. But in practice, though, for large companies that buy your services, how does that work exactly? They get access to what specifically?
So we do an assessment to bring people's skills map to their personal level. It's not one size fits all. That's what I mean. After we help you figure out your skills map, what do you need? We provide a platform with a number of EdTech partners that we create a learning path to be attached to your promotion in the job. So this is the skills gap you have. This is the learning path you need to do. And this is what you're going to get after you finish your learning in 3 to 6 months and an eternal loop. We provide a people analytics dashboard to companies to know who is doing what. And then to compensate. We do work on motivation and compensation.
Got it. Okay. So it would be fair to say it's a B2B Netflix for lifelong learning for companies, basically. Is that but custom, to each individual client?
Yes, with a lot of data. I think that Netflix, when you explain Netflix, it's a little bit like on demand-ish. But what we do is that we attach data analytics to every part of the journey.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. And it's cool also, it's your first chapter in your career in which making money is very important because you raise venture.
Finally. Finally. So that's something that Education Journey actually pivoted. In the beginning, we were not doing this business model. That's why I wanted to be very clear, the beginning, because we see that there's an opportunity to scale much faster by doing a B2B SaaS model than, being B2C, for example.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think for most of products of that caliber, being B2B is where the incentives are, just because it's really hard to find. In the end, I mean, knowledge is already out there. It's just that it's really difficult for people to have the correct discipline, right? Many of the courses at Stanford and Harvard are available online, certainly you don't get the community and the other things that are also very important.
Yeah, we are bringing a lot of services to Education Journey. So I think that community is very important. I also think that people learn in different ways. So it's not only about the courses. There's also a need for collaboration and mentoring within the company and then also outside the company. So I have a client, for example, that he said to me, why would I hire some sort of consulting for sales training if I have a rock star in my sales team? So, Education Journey comes in and helps whatever the company's assets is to develop their own workforce. Sometimes it's with courses, as we are an aggregator. We partner with edTechs, so we are a platform that aggregates the best content. But you know what? People learn in different ways. It's not only with courses. That's actually technically 7 ways that we learn, and that was my work at Stanford. And people learn by doing. So, for example, project-based learning. People learn by teaching. when you teach somebody, you are learning by doing it, and people also learn by example. So if you gather the right people in the group, you're going to increase the level of productivity to the whole group based on a few individuals. So what Education Journey really does is come in and help develop the whole learning culture in the company, whether being through courses or through mentoring or through projects. That's why I said to develop the workforce. And so not necessarily through courses, but through whatever they need to learn and to continue their learning skills.
Awesome. Very good. And in order to, just so we begin wrapping up, also, I wanted to bring up I'd love to just learn more about the genesis of how the Brazil Silicon Valley got started. And for those that don't know, I've said this in the beginning of the show, but just it's a massive shout out to you. I've been in this business of startups and conferences, I think for the last 15 years. At this point, I really hate conferences. I only go to very specific events, mostly as a speaker, and then just the event that you guys put together is a must event. I'd say that's very relevant, at least for our agenda, and I know that comes with a lot of hard work and intention. So congratulations for that, and I'd love to just learn how you guys, how that whole thing got started, because it's an important cultural connection, I would say, in many ways.
Sure. So I think that everything I do is to help people, thrive and do better what they do. And really, Brazil and Silicon Valley started by some of us living here in the Valley, looking around and saying, how can we do better and do more in establishing a connection between Brazil and Silicon Valley? We think that here is the epicenter of education, of innovation and technology. I think that I'm glad to know that nowadays there's other hubs, but you cannot argue that here is just like all over the place, the air you breathe. And so how could we establish a relationship that we could strengthen the influx of network and what's happening right now here in the Valley and Brazil? And so we thought, why not we bring Brazilians to listen to the best minds here in the Valley and elsewhere? So we not only invite people in the Valley, but also other people in the world, thinking that the Valley represents the best minds in the world, not only Americans. So we had the former Minister of Education of Israel and the UK here, just to give an example. So we 5 founding members are from a different backgrounds, and we thought, okay, so let's gather our complementary skills and network and put this together. And so we invited all the Brazilian students at Stanford and Berkeley to be part of the operational team. And we developed together. It's a very, very student-led, and it's a nonprofit again. And we invited the best sponsors to be part of this journey. We are very grateful for their buy-in of our dream and for the students who make all this happen. And we at the board, we just offer support and guidance, and of course, our network and our experience on how to make this happen. I think that one of the reasons why it's such a success is that we are very picky on inviting the right people to be here, and in making the 700 guests very diverse. We want it to be more diverse, and I'm sure we're going to be more diverse as years pass. But so far, we mix all the verticals and all the years of experience and that you're doing. So you find interesting people in the hallways, I know, of course, you're going to listen to the best minds. And also, like you said, we try to bring people that do not show up in other conferences and do not do, for example, lots of podcasts that you can listen to what the person said on a podcast or at Brazil, Silicon Valley. So I guess that our guests are very special, and they like our purpose. They like the fact that it's invitation only, non-transferable, entrepreneurial force in Brazil. And I don't know, just
No, I mean, but I
happens.
can see a lot of your career path and multiple different stages of your life kind of like being represented into this conference, from, psychology to public policy to then being a venture-backed founder, because you are correct in the sense that it's a student-led, more discreet, invitation only and free, effectively all subsidized by the sponsors. It brings the correct allure to the event. And again, I think that it was very nice to just be on the first one and the second one and see how much it improved, from one edition to another, because usually what happens is that it gets worse. So it's actually, and again, so, congratulations in that sense.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And
we are very intentional, Pedro. I think that's something that also I look back in my career and I see it's how intentional I have always been in doing my best, in doing something that it's meaningful, meaningful, like why you're doing it. You have to know why you're doing what you're doing, because things are already so full of challenges and uncertainty. So at least you have to know what to do, why you're doing what you're doing. It has to be meaningful and intentional in order to get more chances of getting right.
Absolutely. Well, Iona, really appreciate your time today. It was great to just learn more about you, your story, and how you see the world. Thank you so much for being a guest at the podcast.
Thank you, Pedro. I really enjoyed having this conversation. And I think that you made some very difficult questions that I don't stop to think about them for a long, long time. So I hope that the end result is good. So thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. As always, you can listen to the Inevitable podcast in all platforms. So if you probably listen to a podcast, you will find us there. Thanks for listening, and see you at the next episode.